You can't just put it up on social media and think people are going to flock to it. You have to be so creative about, connecting with people and really holding their hand through the process.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It is my distinguished pleasure to have Jenny Kassan here today, Crowdfund Professional Association President for 2025, one of the pioneers of Title III, Reg CF, Title III of the Jobs Act, attorney working as a coach quite often with issuers, with founders to successfully raise capital using these exemptions. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. And Jenny, thanks for taking the time to hop on the podcast here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And just to familiarize the audience a bit more, where did it all begin for you? How did your career get started and point you in the direction of regulated investment crowdfunding?
Yeah. So when I got out of law school, my first job was at a nonprofit organization in a low-income community in Oakland. And one of my jobs was to work with the small business owners there. And I found them very inspiring. They were immigrants from all over the world, as well as Native folks, just so diverse and contributing so much to the community. And one thing that I noticed is that they were all struggling with lack of access to resources of all kinds, especially financial. So I started to try to understand better, I really didn't know much about the capital markets at that time. And, why was it that some businesses have access to capital and some don't? And I started to learn more, and I realized that there's this whole area of law called securities law, which actually I didn't know about at that time, even though I had gone to law school and passed the bar. But I learned that there was this area of law that was so complicated and convoluted, and there's state level and federal level and all these different complexities to it that most people don't understand anything about it. And so that's one reason why many businesses don't have access to capital, because it's become this very mystified, mysterious thing that you need professionals to help you do. So I just became really, really passionate about helping small businesses who often don't have access to those kinds of supports to be able to raise capital in ways that would be more supportive of their long-term goals, not so extractive like a lot of, the things that they do normally have access to, which is like really high interest loans. And so I got really excited about the idea of regular folks being able to invest in businesses that they love, because I felt like that would be a win-win for everybody. The businesses would be able to access patient supportive capital. The investors would be able to invest, take some of their money that they already have invested, maybe on Wall Street, and put some of it into small businesses that they care about and love, and maybe in their own community or maybe in another community, but a non-public company.
Sure.
Because most businesses most people invest only in public companies. And so I wondered, why is it that more people aren't investing in the 99.9% of businesses that are not public companies? So I kind of went on that journey of learning all about that. I started a law firm in 2015 to focus. In 2006 is when I first started. I started at another law firm in 2015, but I started to learn about securities laws and what some of the limitations were. And then in 2009, I co-founded a nonprofit called Sustainable Economies Law Center. We decided to do some advocacy with the Securities and Exchange Commission to ask for a crowdfunding exemption. And amazingly enough, through a strange series of events, by 2012, it actually had passed. What we had originally requested, they changed it a fair amount from what we had originally requested, but what we had asked for was let people invest up to $100 each in anything they choose. So
There you go.
I was there at the White House signing ceremony in 2012. But the interesting thing is we were already helping people raise money using crowdfunding, but we had to do it under state law. So and oftentimes the state law was very onerous, and it took a long time to get through the process. So by the time the law, the Jobs Act Title III went into effect in 2016, we were thrilled to have that as a tool, even though it's far from perfect.
Sure. And what an amazing feat to be able to, in 2009, come up with this concept. See it tweaked a little bit, but actually signed into law at the White House in 2012, enacted, activated May of 2016. We had campaigns live day one back then. How has it been watching it evolve? From ideation, 2009, 2012 signing, what has gone to plan? What's been a bit different that's been positive? What's been a bit different that you see room for improvement around? How's this all unfolded for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been crazy to watch. I will say that at the very beginning, when it first became legal, I decided to test it out and raise money on a platform back in, I guess we launched it in 2017. And it was a really interesting learning experience going through that process. And I've had many clients raise money over the years using regulation crowdfunding. And over time, as the industry has evolved, we've definitely seen a lot of challenges. One of the biggest problems we're seeing, I think, is that because the platform, if you raise money using regulation crowdfunding, you must use a platform, a licensed portal or a broker dealer. And the regulations on the portals are so intense. I had a client that had a portal and it ended up having to get shut down because the regulatory burdens were so high. The way you can make money if you run a portal is very limited. What you're allowed to say if you have a portal is very limited. So it's been frustrating that, the reason why I originally got involved in this space was because I really did want to help those smaller businesses, the mom and pops and the, not the big giant tech startups that are going to take over the world, but, small local businesses of all kinds that maybe only need to raise a few $100,000. And unfortunately, because the industry has gotten so complex and so highly regulated by FINRA mostly, it's very hard to support those smaller raises. So that's something I'm trying to figure out as president of Crowdfunding Professional Association, how we can find ways to support those smaller businesses. And I have had some clients, that have been able to make it work, smaller kinds of businesses, that have been able to raise a few $100,000 or so, but it's challenging to find, a portal that's even willing to help them these days.
Yeah. And you mentioned the complexities, and as a securities attorney, hearing it, from you, I watch it firsthand talking to founders, and they're trying to figure out how to navigate the waters through the compliance, all the aspects of legal and accounting to go live. I'll watch delays occur regularly in terms of the timeline they provide to us as the marketing agency and when they physically go live. Sometimes it's, months. I've seen it take over a year before. And at that point, they can be drained financially,
Exactly. Yes.
mentally. It could be a different discussion altogether. So I'm with you. I would love to find ways to streamline that process so that those groups, and like you said, few $100,000 raise can market to their first degree networks, their second degree networks. That's where many of the investments are coming from for Reg CF anyway, right? And then being able to use that traction, maybe do a rolling close and market to larger audiences from there, perhaps if it fits their initiatives. But I watch so many issuers, so many founders get backed up in that setup phase that it's definitely a deterrent, even for some groups to even approach this avenue.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I've had many clients that have spent so long getting ready to launch that by the time they finally launched, they were completely exhausted. They weren't really ready, and that's where the hard part begins, is the actual marketing of the campaign, and many of my clients have tried to do that on their own without support from businesses like yours. And many of them couldn't do it. They just were too exhausted, too overwhelmed, and they ended up, you know, quite, I'd say, probably 30% of my clients ended up just giving up and not reaching their goal, which is really sad because they put all this time and energy into preparing, and then they just couldn't get it going.
It's definitely sad. Like you, I'm a big believer in this exemption, the democratization in terms of access to capital for founders. And I got in this space for similar reasons, where we were working with groups on growth marketing campaigns that were constantly bringing up fundraising and capital raising and pulling us into the process in a variety of different ways. So once I learned I could solicit, I could use digital marketing to reach first on 506C Regulation D campaigns to accredit investors, high net worth individuals, but we could use our digital marketing skill sets there and see success. Immediately noticed could be of value here. And on the other side of the table, of course, for investors and being able to enter into these early stage, growth stage deals that are private, and valuations look much different than a lot of the companies in the public markets. So being able to get the education out there around regulated investment crowdfunding, for our focuses here at DNA, to how to market those successfully. And we're on the front lines of performance. We want to be able to get tips out there in terms of how to get investors to the deal, how to remind them. A lot of follow-ups occur. What does that look like with digital marketing? I watch these deals and describe them as a digital marketing exercise in many respects, where it needs enough traffic to get to the offering page, to produce enough conversions to investments to be able to hit the goal. And even utilizing first degree networks, still have to plan that out and really map out what's going to be talked about when and where to get enough engagement all the way through. I think there's some misconceptions in the space that this is easier than it is.
I
And
know.
service providers like to talk about, their biggest successes, and we could be guilty of that at times too. That's why I like to point at all of these other types of results versus the reality of how many companies actually hit 100K, 500, a million. Even just looking at the 100, 200, 300 type increments, it really requires a lot of moving pieces to be able to get enough people there to get a small percentage of them, in most cases, following digital marketing best practices, to actually participate.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've had many clients that, they were, I generally work with small businesses that often have like a mission-driven component of what they're
Yes.
doing. They're trying to make the world a better place in some way. I should say, actually, every client I work with is like that, to various degrees. And so, it, it can be a very compelling offering, but you can't just put it up on social media and think people are going to flock to it. You have to be so creative about, connecting with people and really holding their hand through the process, because even though investment crowdfunding has been around for a while, at the federal level, most people have never done it. Most
Yeah.
investors have never done it. And so it's a little bit of a scary prospect to go onto a website, put in your social security number, put in your wealth and income, and invest online. And so, one of the things I'm really passionate about is not just helping individual entrepreneurs successfully raise money using this tool, but also growing the movement of people who are excited to invest this way. And we don't yet have kind of a spokesperson that has huge following that is leading that charge. I hope we will get to that point where, I remember when we first started out and we were advocating for the legislation, Whoopi Goldberg, I don't know if you
Wow.
remember that, but she was actually advocating for it. And that was awesome. It really got a lot of traction when she kind of learned about it and started advocating for it. But yeah, so I think, and it would be so beneficial if more people would learn about it as an option and start, dipping a toe in, because right now the public markets represent such a tiny percentage of the companies in our country. And oftentimes, public companies aren't always doing the things that are best for our country and for our communities and for our workers and consumers. Whereas there might be a business down the street that's quite successful and profitable and is highly beneficial to your community, creating jobs, maybe contributing to local charities, et cetera. And yet, a lot of people don't realize I could invest in that business and I might make just as good a return, if not better, and, do something good for my country and my community.
And when I speak to Reg CF investors, there's often that sentiment in the background. Even if it's not a company that's directly in their community, it's in a space, a vertical, an industry that they have an affinity for. It's around a topic that they want to see accelerate in terms of where it's going into the future. And average investment, I saw for King's Crowd, they provide a lot of the analytic platforms. There's analytics for the industry, as you know. For 2024, it was just over $2,000 as an average investment. For Reg CF, I think it was $2,025. So it's not necessarily what retail investors are putting into their portfolio and looking to get a 20% or 25% over 5 years, 10 years return on, as much as they want to be part of the movement. They want to be able to say they're a shareholder in blank company, in the pizzeria down the street,
Yep.
in a company that's doing amazing things for sports tech, and they're sharing it with their friends while on the golf course or their son's
Right.
baseball game. They want to be able to feel like they're making an impact and contributing in the way that those organizations are.
Right.
So
Plus, there's
I
often great perks that go along with it.
oh yeah, things that money can't buy in many situations. Some of the films, the entertainment projects, you get your name in the credits. You get, I guess that could be bought in some respects, but dinner with the director.
Right.
There's all different types of perks that
Yeah. Being
go
part of a
beyond someone's
community
purchase.
of people that are passionate about the same thing. Because, yeah, sometimes the perks are, hey, let's bring all the investors together in one
Yep.
place and have a great time, and so you're getting to connect with other people who share those same passions.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a good thing across the board. I think that it's going to be a primary tool to A rounds, seed capital at that, and just needs more awareness. I explain to people what regulated investment crowdfunding is every day. And I've been doing so, maybe not every single day, but since 2016. So I've watched other alternative financial markets, Web3, have a completely different path forward where people are telling me about it every day. I think some of it is because of the financial returns. And as there's more exits in the space, there's going to be more of a spotlight on it. But I look at stats. I think there's about 8,000 companies that have used Reg CF at the moment. And I've heard numbers of 24 million small businesses. And why aren't more of those groups, entities utilizing Reg CF?
Hmm.
Why have only a few million investors participated in these deals, and it's lack of awareness. So curious to see if there's more spokes figures in the entrepreneur world, maybe something touching government, different public institutions to be able to support small businesses, but just more mentions across the board.
Yeah. And one of the things Crowdfunding Professional Association is doing is advocating for some changes to the law to make it easier. And also, one of the things we're really excited about advocating for is a tax credit
Mhm.
so that if we are able to, and there has actually been some interest from some legislators in a federal tax credit where if you invest, let's say you invest $2,000, you could get $1,000 tax credit back. So, that could really make a big difference. And there are other ways that people can get some kind of extra support, financial or otherwise, in choosing to invest this way. So hopefully we will end up with tax credits. But then there's other examples, like there are some philanthropic foundations that are looking at doing guarantees so that if you invest in a riskier business that's maybe supporting a low income community, then maybe you can get a guarantee because it's high risk.
Mhm.
So we really need more players to come into the space. We can't just depend on regular folks who, we know that more and more people are, the number of people who are actually investing any money at all in our country is going down. More and more people are unable to make ends meet, and so they don't even have the luxury of investing in anything. But, to the extent that people do have some extra money to invest, it's often their nest egg. It's scary to take a risk on that pizza shop down the corner, down the street, as much as you love it. So bringing in government support, philanthropic support, could really make a big difference in helping people feel more comfortable doing it and know that they're being supported in the risk that they're taking.
As a digital marketer, have to mention social proof, the third party validation that provides as well, because simply put, people don't believe what they see online. So
Yeah.
if they're not familiar with Reg CF and they're being asked to invest into a company, whether it's in the local community or not, there could be some question marks. So to be able to see, oh, hey, these government agencies are promoting it, these philanthropic groups are promoting it, these people I see on TV or follow on social media are talking about it, it really goes a long way.
Yes.
I watch regulated investment crowdfunding campaigns produced similar to reward crowdfunding and Indiegogo Kickstarter type campaigns. And I know that's not the best analogy to make these days, but I do believe it's social dynamics at play, and people are looking for that line around the block versus an empty restaurant sensation. And it doesn't need to be a $4 or $5 million Reg CF or $75 million Regulation A Plus campaign for that matter. It could be a $50,000 raise. But if every time that customer gets back there, because it's likely going to be a few touch points, it's usually not on
Yeah.
the first visit that they put in their personal and financial information. If every time they get back, there's more raised, there's more investor
Yes.
reviews, there's more publishers talking about them, it does something subliminally, subconsciously to the prospect, the
Right.
target audience, at least what we make sense out of it
Yeah.
from the analytics. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be FOMO, you know.
You're
Oh,
missing
look, all
out.
these people are wanting to invest in this. I got to get on board.
Mm-hmm. And we see that happen with the top campaigns in the space, the Reg CFs that do, multiple seven figures. They raise the full 5 million. See a lot of repeat groups. If I see an issuer raise $1 million or more, I could project they're going to do another round. Obviously has to fit into their growth plan, and we're just on the marketing side, but they'll come back to us and say, hey, we're doing another Reg CF. Maybe this time it's a Regulation A Plus campaign. And I think those are great case studies for the industry to be able to watch some of these issuers raise $10 million, tens of million dollars over time. I know it's a different scenario than the small businesses, but I think it attracts more investors to the space and good, growth stage companies with fair valuations in many cases at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and many of the businesses I work with, they don't really need to raise more than once because whatever they need the funding for,
Mhm.
oftentimes, if they are able to reach their goal, they can actually become profitable and they may never need to raise money again, which is great. But, if later on, maybe a few years later, they decide, hey, we could grow more now. Yes, we're
Mhm.
profitable, but now we have a chance to do something bigger, expand in some way. And then they can go back. And if they already have that proof of having done it once, it's great. So yeah, I used to talk about crowdfunding. I haven't said this in a long time, and by the way, when we first started doing this work, we used to call it a direct public offering.
Mhm.
Now we call it investment crowdfunding. But I used to talk about it almost like a water faucet that you could turn on and off.
Yes.
Because if it's not that it's not hard and not a lot of work, but anytime you want to do it, you can do it. So whenever you need money and you can set the terms, that's one thing that I talk to my clients about a lot is you don't have to use an off-the-shelf document like a safe. that may not be appropriate for your particular situation. You can design your offering however you want. It could be some kind of preferred stock with like a preferred dividend and a structured exit. It could be some kind of a debt instrument, maybe a revenue-based debt instrument. So you can really design it in a way that's going to really fit your goals
Mhm.
and is going to result in a win-win for both your business and your investors. So, once you're comfortable doing that, then you just go out to the crowd, and it's such a large population of people that can invest if you have the persistence and the willingness to, invest the time and energy, you can raise the money.
I like to say the most proactive founders have the most successful campaigns. And
Absolutely.
if I'm contacted by a founder that I have a direct relationship with, or I'm a patron of their company, I feel far more inclined to invest in them, even if it's the minimum level. It's backing them, and I'm then a part of that investor pool, and there's a strength in numbers that occurs, going back to that social proof.
Yep.
So I love the fact that you brought up the tax incentive. Had the opportunity to participate in some of those meetings with you in Washington, D.C. I have to say it's very impressive, and get a glimpse into what it looked like back in 2009, 2012, putting all of this together. And that tax incentive, especially if accountants are speaking about that to their clients at a later point, the portals are mentioning, hey, you could get 50% of your investment back, up to a $2,000 investment, $1,000 tax credit back. It could really bring so many more individuals into the marketplace here, into the ecosystem. What is the most difficult aspect of getting these types of programs to get that government backing, and to be able to
Yeah.
get into the next tax bill, to be able to get Reg CF into effect? I ask because few people have done it, at least in my perspective. So what is that experience like? What do you find to be the most impactful in those discussions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really not an expert on legislative and regulatory advocacy. I mean, I did have this amazing experience where some colleagues and I put out that proposal for regulation crowdfunding, which back then I don't even remember what we called it, and it amazingly enough, like 2 years later, actually got signed into law. That was kind of like a once in a ton of lifetimes thing. I kind of attribute it to luck. So I'm not an expert in what it's going to take to get these new ideas into effect. By the way, we have had a few rule changes since the original rules were put out, and they have made some improvements. Like, for
Yes.
example, I remember when when the law first went into effect, there was this horrible thing where you could not talk about the fact that you were raising money using crowdfunding until you filed all your disclosure materials. It was horrible. We had to, and you couldn't even really offer an investment at all because it could be seen as soliciting for the crowdfunding campaign. Thank goodness the SEC came back, changed that, and we now have testing the water. So there's many examples of things that actually have been improved. They've increased the amount that you can raise now. The per investor caps have gone up. So we've already seen some good progress thanks to the efforts of many people. But what does excite me, I will say, is that, if you look at what some of the leadership of the Republican members of Congress that are leading the important committees that are oversee this industry, they are very interested in making some changes to make things better. So, I'm hoping that the time is right to really have some input and to educate them because they already want to do it. We're not fighting against a situation where unfortunately we did have a lot of legislators that were terrified about investor protection. Oh my God, how can we trust people to make decisions on where they put their money? And things have changed in Washington, so that's no longer such an issue. And of course at the SEC, not just in the legislature. So I think we have a really good shot. We just have to kind of get in the door and let them know, hey, we're the people that have been working in this industry for years. We have some insights to share with you. And there's many organizations, not just Crowdfunding Professional Association. There's many others that are involved in that advocacy work, and we're talking to each other to make sure we're, collaborating. So I'm very hopeful.
I'm hopeful as well, and I was amazed by those legislative meetings, the emphasis placed on small business. America's built on small business, and think investor protection fits into that as well. I think both can coexist, and investor opportunity was something brought up in some of those discussions. So again, it's fascinating to see the way it all takes place, and it makes this tool available for founders, for investors. We love working in it, so thank you for putting all of this together. Wanted to ask you for some tips, some recommendations for founders who are tuned in. What are the insights you could provide in terms of how they should get a campaign going? I like to use the word test. I look at marketing growth as a series of tests. What should they test out towards the success of their own Reg CF campaign?
Yeah. I mean, well, one thing I have to say as a lawyer, and I know I hate to say it because people don't like to hear it, but this is a highly regulated activity. Now, things could change. Oops, sorry. Things could change as we do our advocacy work, but you need to really be careful about the legal documents you're using, making sure your disclosures are complete. And like I said earlier, maybe taking the time to really think through what you want to offer to investors and not using an off-the-shelf document provided by the platform. So that's one thing I have to put in a word on that. But in terms of like how to be successful with the campaigns, it's something that I've worked on a lot myself. I've actually raised money myself 5 times using both crowdfunding campaigns and also Rule 506C. I'm actually raising money right now under Rule 506C for a real estate project I'm working on in Baltimore. And I think it's kind of not rocket science. A lot of it is just having a lot of conversations. And I think what I've noticed in both myself and many of my clients is sometimes mindset issues can get in the way.
Hmm.
The thoughts that can come up when you're thinking about asking someone, "Hey, would you like to invest?" can be very self-defeating, like you might all of a sudden be like, "Oh my God, if they say no, I'll be devastated," or who am I to ask this person for money? Or, oh, I don't know if they even have money. I shouldn't ask because it'll make them uncomfortable. Like there's so many thoughts that come up when you start asking people to invest, but the more you can actually ask, yes, it's what you absolutely need a good communication effort in terms of like social media and newspaper articles and all of that. But, having those conversations with small groups or individuals where you just say, "Hey, would you like to invest?" It's really effective to do that with as many people as possible. But you have to get over some of those mindset issues and just get really comfortable with hearing no.
Yes.
And letting those words come out of your mouth and I had a coach. I've had a lot of coaches that have helped me with my mindset limitations, but I had this coach once who was like, pretend you're just offering them a tissue. And so like, would you like to invest? Would you like a tissue? So you have to work on those mindset issues. If you notice that you think these things are coming up for you, which it's very common. I don't think I've had a single client where they didn't find that they couldn't ask, like they would maybe talk to a potential investor and they would talk about their business and how great it is and the fact that they're raising money. And then they would say, "Do you know anyone who might want to invest?" Instead of saying, "Would you like to invest?" So I think my biggest tip is to work on mindset issues. I actually wrote a book. It came out 7 years ago, so it's a little old, but it is still quite relevant. It's called Raise Capital on Your Own Terms, How to Fund Your Business Without Selling Your Soul. And
Right.
there's a whole chapter. There's 6 steps in the book. So it's 6 steps to design your fundraising strategy. And the last step is how to work on mindset issues. Because I think that if you can overcome that, I really do believe it can be like a water faucet that you can turn on. Is it easy? Is it quick? Not necessarily, but there's so much money out there. If you just keep asking and find the people that are passionate about what you're doing, you will raise the money you're trying to raise.
This is great. I am now inclined to read the book, and
Good, good,
I
good.
love the title, by the way. I haven't heard it brought up like that before of mindset. And I have to speak with my business development team about similar topics at times. Founders we work with, some of them don't want to be on video. Some of them are, shy to pitch their first degree network when really that's the foundation for your campaign. That's what you want to add
Yeah,
digital marketing to. That's what you want the portal's audience, if you're running on a portal where there's an existing audience, to respond to and be able to see that traction, showcase that momentum. And to feel comfortable doing it, creating content, they say, do it again and again and again and again and again. You're going to get better over time. Your
totally.
first 100 episodes, your first 100 panels, they're not going to compare to later ones. So almost the same ideology of the first 100 people you pitch. It may not come
Totally.
out great. Get comfortable with hearing the words no. I love that advice, but be able to play it as an organic conversation. I admittingly was shy to admit that I started a business when we first formed the company. As we started running successful campaigns and bringing on larger clients, I was sharing with more of my family and friends, and it's very natural at this point. But I think behind it was a fear of failure, and that may be in the mindset for some founders of what if we take their money and what if it doesn't
Yes,
work?
exactly. That's a huge fear. If I take money from my Uncle Bob, like, oh my God, what if I lose the money? But I always say, like, stay in your own lane. Like, it's your
Mhm.
job to ask, and it's Uncle Bob's job to make a decision, yes or no. Like, you don't have to
Correct.
protect them. They're adults. So they know that you might lose the money. And, I have had clients where they raised a bunch of money. They went out of business. They had to tell their investors, sorry, we failed. We lost your money. And it wasn't the end of the world. Their
Mhm.
investors understood, they knew they were taking a risk. So,
Yeah.
there's a lot that comes up, but yeah, it's just the first step, I think, is just notice the voices that come up when you are either talking to a potential investor or thinking about talking to a potential investor, and just listen. And you might hear a voice saying, like, oh my God, who am I to ask them? Or whatever it is that comes up. Write down that voice that you hear what they say, and realize it's not true what that voice is saying, and you can come up with an alternative thing that you can program into your brain.
Absolutely. They say 90% of what happens in life is mental. 10% is what
Totally.
physically
I believe
occurs.
it. Yeah.
And to that fear that I had early on, we didn't bring on investors, we bootstrapped. And I would have, I think back towards those discussions, even some potential opportunities. And the question I'd rather have a founder ask, if, what if it doesn't work? What if it does? What if
Right.
Uncle
They'll
Bob
be mad
is
at you that you didn't give them a chance to invest.
Exactly. I would be mad at a friend if, they started a company, they did a funding round, friends and family, low entry point, anyone could get involved and I didn't know about it and they became a unicorn or, whatever level. Hey, I want to share in this. I want to, grow
Exactly.
with you guys. And that's part of, I know 506C, accredited investor, higher minimum levels, but Reg CF, $100 minimum is common, $500 minimum in those brackets. To be able to have someone invest at those levels, they're supporting you. They want to be involved. And if you get comfortable with those conversations with people around you, if you're able to bring in some capital, if you're able to show some movement, once you get to audiences that don't have a direct relationship with you, you're going to be far more comfortable speaking to them, building a rapport, bringing in larger, transactional values at that, and being able to use digital, you can get to thousands of people a day. You can get to millions of people potentially. And what's working offline, you could bring to scale with
Yeah.
digital, with online.
Exactly. And, I think it's a common human thing. It's not just when you're raising money, it's a common human thing not to feel comfortable asking for things, like
Yeah.
asking, hey, I'm moving. Can you come help me pack up my stuff? Everyone feels uncomfortable doing that, asking their friends, or, hey, I'd like to practice for a job interview. Would you listen to me? Would you pretend you're interview? All these things that our friends and our acquaintances and colleagues can help us with. A lot of us feel uncomfortable just asking for help, and we want to do everything on our own. So just learning how to ask for things. I remember there was a book by a guy who like forced himself to ask for really crazy things from strangers every single day
Huh.
to get over his discomfort. Like he would go up to a stranger and like knock on their front door and say, "Can I play soccer in your front yard?" or something like that. And so we all need to get more comfortable with that because, you know, humans need to help each other out. And when you help someone
Agreed.
else out, you feel really good.
That's
So when you
correct.
give someone the opportunity to help you, you're actually doing them a favor because they're gonna feel good.
That's a fact. They say tipping feels good for the tipper. Obviously, who's receiving
True.
the tip gets value from that as well too. But I look for areas where I could contribute and be of impact and be of service.
It feels
Uh,
really good.
yeah, absolutely. And you're giving that opportunity to them. Maybe you're helping them build out sections of their investment portfolio. High risk, high
Yeah.
return percentages at that. Maybe, but you're giving them an opportunity.
Yeah. And there are many people who feel that their investment portfolio is not diversified enough in the sense of, for example, race and gender.
Yes.
So if you happen to be a person of color or, female or non-binary, and you give people the opportunity to invest in your business, oftentimes they're excited to invest. Not obviously, they probably won't invest just because of your identity, but they're excited to be able to diversify who they're investing in because most mainstream investments are, like most Fortune 500 companies are run by white men. So that's just another example of something you might not even think of that people
Mhm.
they might be so thrilled that you're giving them the opportunity to do that.
And the stats around minority, female founders for this space are amazing compared to public markets, and something I think is going to continue growing as a whole. I see so many founders that, hear about Reg CF. They think they're going to raise their full goal. They think they're going to raise 1.235 million before needing, additional audits and financials, the full 5 million. And they get started and not too much is happening. Or maybe there's an initial push and they raise 100, 200K, and then it kind of plateaus. And we're marketers. Our minds think in the terms of optimization and pivoting. Do you have any recommendations? Do you have any insights, words of encouragement on how to optimize when things are moving slow?
Mm. I mean, part of it, I think, is just recognizing that things do tend to move slow in the middle. So sometimes the slow moving nature of it may not be a bad thing. It may just be kind of the natural progression of your campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think sometimes it is, that you get burnt out, that you get tired. It can be grueling to keep it going. But again, I think it does go to asking for help. Like if you did
Yes.
raise, let's say you raised 200,000 and then it's kind of slowing down and you're trying to raise the 1.2. Guess what? All the people who invested in that, who invested in that original 200,000, they want you to be successful. And again, people don't always think to ask, how can I ask for help from these people that obviously care about what I'm doing and support me because they invested already. So I'd say just, going out and gathering that support and also just being really creative. One thing I help my clients do given what their business is, there might be some affinity groups out there that would be very supportive of their business. Like I always give the example of like, let's say you have a vegan restaurant.
Yes.
There's so many organizations like environmental organizations, vegan organizations that support veganism that you might not always think of in, connecting with them as potential supporters. But guess what? They're going to be super excited that you have this vegan restaurant because they support veganism. So there's many different examples of that where people don't always think of who their allies might be and you know, who the like-minded folks are in the organizations and the communities that might be excited to maybe not even invest themselves, but at least get the word out.
I'm a big fan of strategic partnerships and audience brands that are targeting the same audiences with the complementing offer. So around an affinity group that they're speaking about their group, their own initiatives, but this may fit perfectly into that. And I believe, Reg CF is a powerful marketing platform. You get a lot more value than just the capital itself. So
Yeah.
being able to seed these relationships, pointing at the capital raise itself, but they can be long term. They could survive and thrive well past the raise itself. But love that
Yeah,
encouragement of ask for help.
speaking of that, I mean, you've probably mentioned this before on other podcasts, but they've studied like when you have investors that are also customers, they
Mm-hmm.
do 2 to 3 times more business with you because they're investors. I looked into that data from a few different sources. So raising money using regulation crowdfunding isn't just a way to get money. It's a way to get way more loyal customers that are going to do more business with you and are going to refer their friends to you. So yeah, it has so much power beyond just the money that you get.
I've heard the term investimers,
Yes, yes. One of
customer
our founders,
users.
I think, coined that.
I hadn't heard that stat of 2 to 3 times more business. I watch it happen firsthand, though. Ambassadors, even if it's a B2B type product and they're not direct customers, clients of the brand, they're reposting, they're talking about the company, what well beyond the campaign itself. They peer-to-peer market and bring in more investors. When we're running an advertising campaign and we look at the cost per acquisition of each investment that comes in, we only anticipate that being a percentage of the actual investors in the deal because we know they're going to share. We may see someone with the same last name, someone from the same city come in. We may see different social posts about the deal. So being able to bring in more of a community is definitely a byproduct of the capital raise and the marketing exposure itself. What about scaling? What tips, examples do you have for campaigns that have hit their goal the quickest or, the largest amount raised or just in general? What are some campaigns or some learnings you're able to share about scale?
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, and you're way more of an expert on this than I am. But in my experience, I've seen some of my most successful clients, the keys were the persistence, the
Yes.
creativity, and the getting more people involved. So, like, I had this one client that was actually opening up a grocery store, and the investment they were offering was way below a market rate return. Like, everyone who invested, they knew that first of all, it was a high risk thing because it was a grocery store in a low income neighborhood. And even if it was successful, the return was going to be fairly low. But the founder was just so good at like he would host these really fun events where people would come and have a great time and they would invest at the event. He would call on all kinds of allies, people who are passionate about bringing healthy food to a low income community. He he just was very persistent, creative. Every week this was before Reg CF, so he had a little more flexibility in how he could market, but he would come up, you could probably, I assume you could do this now too, but like he would come up with these things where like every week there'd be a different offer. Like this week, if you invest, you get a t-shirt. This week, if you invest, we have someone who's promised to match every investment up to 50,000. You know, there was like a special every week, and he was just awesome. And he was just so passionate about building this supermarket that the passion and the enthusiasm were super contagious. And he just didn't give up and didn't give up. And he ended up raising over quite a bit over $1 million for something that many people thought like he could never raise money for this because it was so risky, such a low return. So yeah, from what I've seen, it's like there's no kind of magic to it. It's that persistence, getting creative, keeping it fresh, and then just enlisting as many people as possible to help you.
They say it's 7 to 17 touch points before a digital visitor converts, makes an investment.
Yeah.
And it's all in the follow-up, that persistence, getting creative all the way through. It's what I'm hearing with the events, with perks and compliantly, of course. But with all of these updates, it shows something about the nature of the founder. It shows something about the sentiment of the group as well, and the mission when you see that. Especially in comparison to crickets and just putting a deal up and hoping people participate. So,
yeah.
Excellent recommendations.
Thank you.
Well, Jenny, this has been so educational for me. I've worked on over 500 deals. I have a page and a half of notes here. I'm sure the audience is taking in a lot as well too. As we begin to wrap up, are there any final thoughts that you want to leave listeners, viewers with today? And where are the best places for them to go to learn more, besides the Crowdfund Professional Association site, of course?
Well, I do want to put in a plug for the Crowdfunding Professional Association. If you are passionate at all about growing regulated investment crowdfunding, because you care about our country's economy, because you want to move money from Wall Street to Main Street, because you care about small business, because you care about people's freedom to be able to invest where they want to invest and not be forced to only invest in 3,000 companies on the public markets, please join us. It's a very affordable membership. And we're going to really be doing a lot of fun things this year. And I think there's a lot of things I'm excited about this year, but one of the most exciting is the opportunity to influence legislation. And we won't be able to do that as well if we don't have a great membership to back us up. So I hope everyone listening will consider joining the organization. And then in terms of my private work, my website is just jennykassan.com. And I have a lot of resources there, free resources to, help with all kinds of legal and coaching tips related to raising money, whether using regulated investment crowdfunding or other types of tools. So yeah, check it out.
And highly recommend that you do. Jenny, thank you so much for taking the time to create content with us. This has been great, and I'm sure the audience is going to get a lot out of it, and you're going to be, seeing visits to your site. I want to do my part and, play a role to influence legislation as much as possible as well, and look forward to this 2025 and growth for the industry.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time. Take care.